That is an unbreakable record. It has been 67 years since a team scored even half that many. To do this, Georgia Tech had to score 32 touchdowns in 55 minutes, which means it had to score a touchdown every minute 43. Now, it is fair to say that Georgia Tech was a million times better than Cumberland College, but that doesn't explain this. Vast superiority alone explains Secretariat, who won the Belmont by 31 lengths. It explains the 1940 Chicago Bears, who won the NFL championship 73-0. It explains the time UConn women's basketball took a 74-9 lead on SMU. Those are routes, yeah, they're blowouts. This was an irrational, malicious act of cruelty that just happened to also technically barely be a sporting event. We have accounts of what happened. It's scoreable. We can score it. In the same way we can award a blue ribbon to a supernova. But first, let's understand where this malice came from. It's 1915. Cumberland's team, which used to be good, is now terrible. The coach is a reverend from around town who doesn't know the rules and doesn't approve of all the violence, so he makes up new practice drills that are more to his liking. In one drill, he has two guys stand a few feet apart and just lob the ball to each other over and over and over. In another drill, he has them sit in a circle and close their eyes, and he would place the ball behind one of them, and then they'd have to guess which one had the ball. It was like an even worse version of Duck Duck Goose. I don't know, I feel stupid even talking about it. Unsurprisingly, none of the players came back after that season, and it was up to George Allen, the 20-year-old athletic manager, to save Cumberland football. He figured that if the baseball team could get a little bit of buzz, it could sell enough tickets to finance the football team, so he arranged for Cumberland baseball to beat their opening opponent as badly as they could. The thing is, Cumberland players weren't good enough to do that, so he convinced the minor league baseball team to dress up in Cumberland's uniforms and play as them. It was an entire team full of ringers. I couldn't confirm this, but I believe the minor league team in question was the Nashville Volunteers, half of whom had Major League Baseball experience. Cumberland destroyed Georgia Tech, 22-0. They were hitting everything. After a while, they got bored and they just started bunting every at-bat, and they still scored 3 more runs just by bunting. Georgia Tech baseball was humiliated, and so was their coach. His name was John Heisman. Heisman was a great baseball coach, but he remains one of football's architects. Let's look at a modern-day football game. The scoreboard shows the down, yardage, and game clock. That was John Heisman's idea. The quarterback yells, "Hut." Heisman came up with that. Then the center snaps the ball in the air to the quarterback. Heisman invented that. Then the quarterback throws a forward pass. Heisman invented that too. This quarterback was the best in the nation, so they gave him a trophy called the Heisman Trophy. In showing up John Heisman, Cumberland angered a football god. 1916 rolled around, and Cumberland no longer had a football team. Heisman didn't care. Georgia Tech Cumberland was on the football schedule, and Heisman threatened to charge the school $3,000 if they forfeited. That's $66,000 in today's money, and it was more than Cumberland could comfortably afford. Heisman had another target, sports writers. Couldn't stand it. I mean, it's not for no reason. Sports writers are useless. We are useless. Heisman took issue with the way sports writers oversimplify. They figured that the more points a team scored, the better that team was. Heisman knew it wasn't as simple as that, so he wanted to rack up as many points on Cumberland as he possibly could to show that if you really wanted to and your opponent was bad enough, you could score as much as you wanted. In order to save themselves a crippling amount of debt, Cumberland rounded up a bunch of law students, some of whom didn't even know how to play football, and sent them to play against what may have been the best football team on the planet. It's the afternoon of October 7th, 1916. H.J. Carney waits for the opening kickoff to fall out of the sky. He doesn't move. He looks to his right, where Edwards, the quarterback, makes a block. He turns to his left, where a man listed as George Murphy gets ready to throw another block. This is not actually George Murphy. This is Johnny Dog Nelson, the only ringer George Allen was able to recruit this time around. He's a former player and a sports writer by trade. Here he is reporting on another football team a month from now. Johnny Dog whiffs entirely. Carney still hasn't moved. He's clobbered right where he caught the ball. Edwards, who made the first block, is knocked out cold. Cumberland has lost its quarterback on the first play of the game. Cumberland gains 3 yards on its first play from scrimmage. It's one of only 4 times they'll get past the line of scrimmage all day. They choose to punt on 3rd down, and Tech scores 2 plays later. Cumberland fumbles on 1st and 10, Tech scores. Cumberland fumbles on 1st and 10 again, Tech scores again. By the 18th play of the game, Tech is already up 28-0. Everything is as it should be. Georgia Tech is a powerhouse. They were in the middle of a 33-game undefeated streak that lasted more than 4 years. Up 28-0, Georgia Tech is stopped at the 1, but it's not because Cumberland stopped them. The opposite, actually. Tech's running back, Strupper, takes it to the 1 untouched. The Cumberland players actually get out of his way. But then he downs it. What happens next comes from a book about this game called You Dropped It, You Pick It Up by Jim Paul. It is the most complete source on this game I was able to find. Sadly, it's out of print. It explains that another of Tech's running backs, Canty Alexander, had yet to ever score a touchdown, and his teammates liked to give him grief about it. A week prior, Tech got to the 1 and handed Alexander the ball, and then his linemen just moved out of the way and let him get clobbered for 3 straight downs, and then they gave somebody else the ball to score on. They were gonna do the same thing here. The Tech players just hit the dirt and gave up, but then for some reason, the Cumberland players did too. Maybe they were scared, maybe it was some weird animalistic instinct, or maybe they just didn't know what to do. That left Alexander as the only man standing on the field, 1 yard from the goal. This should be the easiest touchdown of all time, but he bobbles the snap and he inadvertently boots it a couple of times before he finally recovers it in the end zone. As a 2-team effort, it's probably one of the dumbest plays in the history of football. So after the touchdown, Georgia Tech receives the kickoff. Yeah, Georgia Tech, who just scored, receives the kickoff. See, back in the day, if your opponent scored on you, you had the option of kicking or receiving on the ensuing play. I don't know why you would ever do this or why this was an option, but it was. And throughout the game, Cumberland chose to kick after being scored on 5 times. Early in the second quarter, Tech leads 70-0. Against all odds, Cumberland actually finds itself a 3rd and 1. Coach Allen wants to catch them off guard, and he wants to do this by punting. George E. Allen will later go on to have an eventful life. He'll serve as a political operative and become close with FDR, Truman, and Eisenhower. They were presidents who had known him. He even wrote a book. It was called Presidents Who Have Known Me. But for now, he is a nervous 20-year-old nobody coaching against John Heisman. He orders his team to punt. But in the huddle, they decide, no, we are absolutely not punting on 3rd and 1. They line up, Leon McDonald gets the pitch right, and then rather than go the 1 yard for the first down, he panics and punts anyway. It bounces out of bounds 11 yards downfield. Play 45. Morris Gouger fields the kick, and Georgia Tech's special team unit somehow overruns him. There's nothing but open field in front of him. He has daylight. Cumberland hasn't even made it to the 50-yard line yet. A touchdown would be unthinkable.
If you overdraw your account, Wells Fargo gives you an extra day grace period to avoid the overdraft fee. What if everything came with a grace period? Like accidentally parking where you shouldn't.
Hey, what about this one? Nah, that one gets an extra day. Somebody got lucky.
Like having an extra day grace period? When it comes to overdrafts, you can with Wells Fargo.
Derek, why'd you take your pants off?
My balls was hot.
I understand.
Hi, my name is Derek Lewis, and I have the record for the most knockouts in UFC history. But there's one thing I couldn't beat, an embarrassing condition called my balls was hot. That was before I found the Performance Package by Manscaped. Now I use Manscaped at least once a day. With Manscaped, my balls are smooth.
Morris trips and falls over a teammate at his own 20. His teammate was looking for his glasses. Play 48. Edwards, the quarterback who was knocked out cold on the first play of the game, is sent back in. He can't really walk straight. He can't even talk. He is showing obvious concussion-like symptoms. He can't call for the snap. His impatient center snaps it anyway and pops him right in the head. Edwards has now appeared in 2 plays and has been carried off the field unconscious 2 times. Later, this will also happen a 3rd time. Today, we look on this with horror. Back then, a concussion was treated about as seriously as a Charlie horse. This game has entered an unbelievably lengthy sequence. Between plays 44 and 82, the line of scrimmage never leaves Cumberland's red zone. For 39 straight plays, about 1/3 of the game, the line of scrimmage for both teams is always inside the Cumberland 20. This is absolutely ludicrous, and it's also what makes Georgia Tech's total offense all the more impressive. See, Tech only managed 471 offensive yards, which is not a ton. That's because they dominated Cumberland's offense so completely that their own offense just didn't have enough room to gain a lot of yards. Look at where their offense got the ball. Only a few of these could be considered real drives in the traditional sense. Most of them started inside the 20. They couldn't gain yards because they kept running out of them. Contrast this with a game Tech played against Vanderbilt in 2016, just a few weeks ago. Tech won 38-7. It was a great game for them. Taking into account turnovers, returns, and every other time they touched the ball on a play-by-play basis, they picked up 17% of the yards they could possibly get. And remember, that's a one-sided route. The 1916 team picked up 72% of all possible yards. No matter where you dropped Georgia Tech on the field, they were highly likely to score immediately on that play. It's staggering. Jim Priest is Georgia Tech's kicker, and he's bored. By the time this game is all over, he will have kicked 18 extra points. He bets his teammate a steak dinner that he can kick a ball through the uprights on a kickoff. But then he one-ups himself and he turns on the Jets. Morris Gouger, while lining up for the catch, smacks into the goalpost. The ball bounces off his head and into Priest's arms. Jim Priest has just caught his own kickoff for a touchdown. It's halftime. Coach Allen's team is physically and emotionally destroyed. Cumberland is losing 126 to nothing. If that were a final score today, it would be the worst final score since 1932. Allen has no choice. He has to go talk to the man himself. He figures maybe Heisman will agree to end the game at 1/2. After all, Cumberland held up their end of the bargain. They showed up. Georgia Tech has all its gate receipts. It's true that John Heisman is a disciplined man. In fact, he was famous for telling his teams, better to have died a small boy than to fumble this football. But he's also a noble sportsman. Maybe he'll show mercy. Heisman does agree to shorten the game. By 5 minutes. He is a creator of this game. He is a football god, and a god who takes instruction from the God of the Old Testament. He is here to reduce them all to pillars of salt. He is a creator of fear and of you. He will grind your bones to make his bread. Skimming 5 minutes off the end still guarantees Cumberland 25 minutes of horror. Sometimes a weak expression of pity is the deepest act of cruelty. Play 78. Johnny Dog fields the kick. He looks before him. All his teammates have fallen to the ground in resignation. He staggers to the 10, and then he joins them. Edwards is back in the game, despite being knocked unconscious twice. He takes the snap and pitches it to Johnny Dog, who pitches it back. Neither of them want the ball. They keep tossing it back and forth, demanding that the other one take it. And the weight of a Georgia Tech tackler crashes down on them both. Edwards is carried off the field a third time. Alright, brief disclaimer. I'm about to tell you part of the story that I don't think is true. It's in the book, so I'm going to tell you about it, but as the story goes, by now Cumberland is short on willing and able players. At least 2 players have run away and hid. 2 more players have leg injuries. So Coach Allen ties their injured legs together and has them hobble along on the field as one man. Play 84. Coach Allen sends in a law student known simply as Pee-wee, who is only here to impress his professors. Pee-wee does not know anything about the rules of football. He is ensured that he will not have to touch the ball or actually do anything. The center direct snaps him the ball. He stumbles around in a state of panic, then flings the ball away in fright. In the ensuing scramble, he runs away. He is now the 4th Cumberland player to try to run out of Grant Field. He hides behind a fence where 2 other players are hiding. They don't want him to give away their hiding spot, so they throw him back over the fence. There is no escape. Play 86. Johnny Dog is chased around the stadium by an actual dog who has wandered in from the stands. Sure, why not? If you're a regular viewer, you'll probably remember this little guy. All I can conclude is that in the early 20th century, wild dogs were everywhere. Play 94. Georgia Tech scores to make it 173-0. The point after attempt that follows is poetry. If Cumberland just lets this extra point sail through, the final score ends up being 223-0. But they block it, unwittingly ensuring the precision of Heisman's revenge. A 22-0 baseball loss is answered by a 222-0 unholy clobbering. I don't know how or why Cumberland finds resolve to fight at this moment, but they do. They execute what's known as the climb the ladder play, which has since been made illegal. One player gets on all fours and grabs the knees of a second player, who bends over the waist and grabs the stomach of a third player. A fourth player, Vishy Woods, steps over their backs and shoulders and leaps as high as he can. This is Vishy Woods' face before the play. This is Vishy Woods' face after this play.
Poll after poll shows Trump is the weakest candidate against Joe Biden. But Nikki Haley crushes Biden by double digits. She even beats him in the swing states that Trump lost in 2020. It's clear Nikki Haley would be the strongest candidate to stop Biden.
The 1982-83 Lakers were Western Conference champions. They scored 10 three-pointers. All season. It was kind of a rough start for the NBA three-pointer. It was introduced in 1979, and three-point attempts actually went down the next year. It took almost an entire decade for teams to even average 2 threes a game. But they did, and in the 90s, teams were really starting to get with the program, and then they repainted the court. See, there was considerably more scoring in the NBA then than there is today. Teams averaged 110 points a game, in large part because of the league's 3 biggest stars, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird. During one 3-year stretch, these 3 guys, just 3 dudes, were responsible for 3.3% of all NBA scoring. And then they retired, and then in the 93-94 season, scoring cratered league-wide. So, as what I would call an indirect response to Magic, Bird, and MJ retiring, the NBA shortened the three-point arc just a little bit, and that's why three-point scoring exploded. After a few years, they brought the three-point line back to where it used to be, and the explosion ended, but three-pointers remained on the rise. Around 2010, they actually plateaued for a little while, and now they're spiking again. When the 3 was introduced, teams didn't even sink 1 per game. Now they hit almost 9 a game. Last season, Steph Curry hit an average of 5 per game all by himself. Thanks to guys like him, basketball is completely horrible and everything is ruined forever. So let's go back and fix it. Shots from up close are easy. Shots from far away are hard. You should never attempt anything that is hard, so why do so many players shoot from out there? Well, the first reason is obviously the three-point arc, which isn't even at a uniform distance. See, it tapers off here at the corners because the court isn't wide enough to fit the full arc because basketball was not designed for this. It is a totally arbitrary reward system. It's as weird as any other zoning law, and just like a zoning law, it determines where people end up doing their business. Look at how polarized shooting has become. The NBA is shooting either from right under the rim or way out here, with not a lot of in between. It's been this way for a while now, and yet in some ways the defense hasn't quite seemed to answer. So before I show you this, I want to acknowledge that defense can't be reduced to just blocks. Not even close. Defense is a very sophisticated thing, but blocks are a stat we've got, and they're at least a signifier of good, tough, close defense. There are plenty of blocks up here, but where are all the blocks back here? Where are y'all at? This little scrap of evidence supports what we all kinda know, that defense out of the perimeter is just not as tough. And I figure that's a big reason behind this craziness. Look at the shooting percentage from each distance last season. Right under the shadow of the basket, the percentages are very high, which is what you'd expect. Then they drop off to 40%, and they stay there. You have to get deep into three-point territory before we see literally any kind of downward trend, which is weird. I mean, look at this. NBA players shot 384 from 3 feet out last season. From 22 feet out, they shot 388. Now, of course, there are reasons for that, but on its face, this is so strange. And that brings us here. That giant red chunk of the court is no man's land. More than half the shots in the NBA last season were taken either in a tiny circle near the rim or in a 2-foot wide stripe 23 feet away. So, how do you feel about this? Is this okay? See, I'm asking you because I don't know. I don't really have that many sports opinions. I just like to take sports however they come. So I'm just going to steal your opinions instead. I asked about 600 basketball fans how they felt about the three-pointer. Almost all of you like it. Some of you don't care, some of you don't like it at all, and a few of you answered, "I really wish the three-point shot did not exist." Some of you were kind enough to explain. "They're bad," says the Beaufort man. "They suck," says They Call Me John B. Angie says, "Because my team that I like is worse than other teams, and they would do better if they didn't exist." Oh, hey, Angie's a Bucks fan. So we can absolutely do that, right? The NCAA does it all the time. During one 6-year period, they vacated almost 2% of their wins. I mean, that's a big chunk of wins, and they just rewrote history as though the wins never happened. If they can do that, we can go rescore the entire 2015-16 NBA season without the three-point line. Should we really do this? Y'all, that is going to be so much work for me. Oh, no. Okay. Here's what we're doing. This is not a what-if scenario. This is a we've decided that all these three-pointers are invalid scenario. The three-point line is as artificial as any other rule, and as such, we can take it away after the fact. Also, just because we're doing this doesn't mean the shots didn't happen, so if Steph Curry shoots from 25 feet out, it still counts. It just counts as a two-pointer instead of a three-pointer. So I rescored this team by team. To start, I looked up all 82 of a team's games, I subtracted 1 point for every 3 they made, then I did the same for their opponent, then I rescored the game. If a losing team ends up with more points, their result changes from a loss to a win, and vice versa. But that's not good enough. What about 3-shot fouls that were assessed because a guy was fouled behind the three-point line? Well, I decided to hunt for every third foul shot and disallow it, and that resulted in 597 made free throws taken off the board. But that's still not good enough. What about all the games that went to overtime but shouldn't have because the only reason the teams were tied at the end of regulation was because one shot more threes than the other? That led to a couple dozen more wins that turned into losses, and of course, vice versa. It turns out that rewriting history is pretty hard. It took me a long time, but I did it because I'm bored and because I love you. Clearly, a few things changed, but before we talk about them, I need to tell you something. See, if these results were 100% accurate, I would have obviously had the same number of wins as losses. I didn't. They're just barely off. I double-checked and I triple-checked, and I still ended up with 7 games somewhere in a stack of 1,230 that had the wrong result. So these results, while highly accurate, are not perfectly accurate. So first, let's look at the Eastern Conference. The Raptors actually took the top seed from the Cavs, who slipped from 57 wins to 51. By the way, we have a ties column now because a lot of games ended up tied at the end of regulation. Obviously, no overtime was played, so a tie is all we got. Anyway, the Pistons fell hard and the Hornets fell super hard. Both lost a playoff spot, and the Bulls and Wizards snuck in. On to the West. The Grizzlies are now a 50-win team, and in the feel-good story of the spreadsheet, the Timberwolves, who originally had only 29 wins, are now in the playoffs. The Jazz snuck in too, and the Mavs and Rockets were bounced out. And yes, if you're a Warriors hater, then you're getting what you want. The Warriors fall from 73 games to 59, and the Spurs get the top seed. But hold on though, because from a certain perspective, these results are almost kind of a credit to the Warriors. You would think that generally speaking, teams that took fewer threes would benefit from the no threes experiment and win more games, right? That's kinda sorta generally true, and it's fun to look at the two outliers who don't follow that rule at all, and the first one is Golden State. Take away their beloved three-point arc, and they're still one of the best teams in the NBA. The inverse is Brooklyn. The Nets don't take many threes, but it doesn't matter. Rewrite the rules in their favor and they're like a statue. They just still suck just as bad. So obviously, by our rules, some of the wrong teams made the playoffs in real life. But I did go ahead and rescore every playoff series without the three-point line, and almost nothing changed. The East ended up exactly the same. Out in the West, there was one tied series. A game flipped, a 4-2 win flipped to a 3-3 tie. What can you do? At any rate, the Warriors won the next round. Warriors Thunder, however, that did change. You probably remember the Warriors' dramatic comeback from a 3-1 deficit to win the series. Well, in Game 6, the Warriors depended on threes, and the Thunder only depended on 3. That flipped a 108-101 Warriors win to a 98-86 Thunder win, which made Game 7 unnecessary and gave OKC the series. In the real world, the Warriors met the Cavs in the finals. And in the real world, just like in our world, they lost and the Cavs are champions. So, to recap, of the 15 playoff series last season, 13 ended the same way with or without the 3. One series was different and one was left undetermined. So what all this is telling me is that the three-point line isn't really good or bad, it's just kinda there. Sure, there are a lot of people who don't like watching games full of threes, and that's cool, but the success rate from out there only drops 1 or 2%. Now, there's no way to really know, but my wild guess is that if the three-point line was taken away, defenses would relax even more than usual at the perimeter, and that might bump that tiny drop in accuracy back up. So you'd probably be watching a similar brand of basketball. You'd just be watching 23-foot twos instead of 23-foot threes because guys would still shoot from out there. Their odds of hitting would be pretty much just as good. So, if three-range shots are still worth taking when they're only worth 2 points, and the season mostly ended up the same without the three, then I figured the three-point line barely matters. If it disappeared, I don't think the league would be any different. I think basically the same teams would win, and I think the players would pretty much play the same way. Which is not to say that the three isn't really neat. It is. I mean, I think it is, and what Steph Curry accomplished last season was fascinating. Just one more thing. So I have 3,695 stars to show you. Each one represents the time a player attempted at least 100 threes in a season. The further up a star is, the more threes a player attempted. The further right a star is, the better the shooting percentage. So up and right is good. For example, Steve Kerr, he was great. He should have shot more. Tony Roden was not great. He should have shot way less. I mean, here we've got a lot of volume shooters, some good shooters, some bad shooters. Kyle Korver was great. Jason Williams was really not. 1991 Michael Adams, you gotta quit it. And there's Steph, proud owner of several of the best three-point seasons ever. Wait, where's his last season? Did I miss it? No. There it is.
You know, starting a business is hard, or so you thought. That's why you need Busy. It's an absolute game changer in getting your business off of the ground. Because I mean, $0 to start your own LLC sounds too good to be true, right?
It's true.
You just have to cover your state fee. That's it. Busy is all about transparency, and they don't have any hidden fees or gimmicks. So if startup costs are holding you back, don't worry. You shouldn't have to wait any longer to start the business of your dreams. Head over to busy.com to get started.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Raise a glass and toast to all of you beautiful people. Cheers, everyone!
Anna said there was a man outside.
He followed me home from the Woodbury event. Get away from the window. You all right?
It's amazing you didn't catch pneumonia.
Well, I haven't been sick in years.
You just got lost a minute ago.
No, I didn't get lost. Listen, I apologize if I made you feel uncomfortable the other night.
It's fine.
It's not fine.
My uncle talks about you a lot. My dad and I were maybe thinking you could care for him during the day. All you'd have to do is be there and go on walks and stuff.
Why did you follow me home from the party? Or do you only remember when it's convenient?
I don't remember.
You don't know what you're doing. You're not able to make rational decisions right now.
Why did you leave?
Things were just getting complicated.
What do you mean?
Why did you and Mom stop talking?
When your mother was your age, she was out of control.
Not with me.
I'm having a really hard time.
usual for you?
Oh, yeah.
What's the usual?
I don't know.
You know,
No.
do you remember her?
No.
3 seasons. In 2020, when he returned from a midseason foot injury, he had significantly more yardage than any other wide receiver in the league the rest of the way. Those two are foundational pieces of a new-look offense that entered 2021 with just 2 players remaining from their Super Bowl 51 squad, Jake Matthews and their longtime protagonist, Matt Ryan. Ryan, through the first 13 seasons of his career, had led Atlanta to the playoffs 6 times. Despite not having won a Super Bowl himself, he has still served as a quasi-gatekeeper for the big game. None of the 6 teams that beat him failed to play in the Super Bowl. Sure, that was inherent to the 2012 Niners and 2016 Patriots, but the 2010 Packers and 2017 Eagles, who beat the Falcons in the divisional round, each went on to win their NFC championship games. And the shocking Cinderella Super Bowl runs of those 2008 Cardinals and 2011 Giants, constituting 2 of the 3 all-time 9-7 conference champs, were both sparked by their wild-card wins over Atlanta, which springboarded their incredibly unlikely ensuing success. If you beat Matt Ryan in the playoffs, congrats, you've proven your Super Bowl bona fides. There's a certain hidden element of majesty